Hello, I'm Nigel Sarbutts, Structured Mediation, here with another PRCA podcast on the theme of productivity in PR. And I'm joined today by somebody I know well, Andy West, a long-standing advisor to agencies, to get his take on what's working and what isn't working. And the theme overall is that teams, be they in-house or agency, are being asked to do more with less. And I think, my own theory is that very often they're turning to products or services or tools or processes to try and solve that. And from a mediation perspective, my view is that the biggest barnacle on the boat is to try and sort out frictions between people, that you can't Trello your way to happiness. You need to have functioning teams before processes can really deliver their best. Now, Andy, you're not necessarily going to agree with that. I hope you don't agree with that, so we can have a proper discussion. But first of all, Andy, just tell us a little bit about yourself and the kind of work you do now, and then go on to talk about what's working and what isn't working in activity.
Love to. Thank you for inviting me on, Nigel. Very quick background to myself. This is now my 40th year in PR, so celebrating quite a momentous year. My background is purely in agency, so B2B technology PR, starting off with a wonderful company called Text 100 for many, many years, and was privileged to work with them and through their growth phase up into the noughties. And then I joined Hotwire, another growth company, and I was very privileged again to work with them through up until 2022, where I left as Group Chief Development Officer and then started my own advisory company, West of Centre. And today I advise a portfolio of agencies from all different sectors on various matters. I operate as both a non-exec director, as a board advisor, and I also roll my sleeves up and get very involved in operational reviews, audits, covering all aspects of agency management.
So super qualified to talk to us about productivity and PR.
Mm.
So, what that simple question: what's working and what isn't, and how would you advise agencies, I guess, mostly to approach this issue of
Yeah,
being asked to do more with less?
yeah. I think your opening comments, I do largely agree with. I mean, there has been a proliferation of tools over the last 20 years, really. I mean, MarTech has really, really grown, and
Mm,
there is no shortage of tools that are out there to help agencies of all sizes manage their time. And at the end of the day, that's what agencies have is time. That's what they sell. That is the unit.
yeah,
The intangible is the expertise and the value. And we'll come on to that, I'm sure,
yeah,
later on. But for me, I think the challenge around productivity is this tension that very often occurs between client and agency. The client is under huge pressure. They
yeah.
always have been. This is, I think I should say, this is not a new phenomenon.
No.
I can look back at, when I started 40 years ago, and we were all under pressure.
Mm,
There was multiple clients who wanted more for less.
mm,
Budgets, have always been tight, and we've gone through cycles of boom and bust in the industry where, yes, it seemed like there was money coming out of our ears and nobody really worried about it. And other times where budgets were really, really tight,
mm,
and clients were insisting or needing to show real return on investment. So they put agencies under pressure.
mm.
So this is not a new phenomenon.
No.
But I think it's been brought into sharp relief now as a consequence of the working environment that we're in, as a
Mm,
consequence of the economy that we're in, and also partly as a consequence of the generation. I mean, Gen Zs, have a different view on life, and a lot of it is very worthy. So I think you're right. And, to me, it is about leadership. It is about both agency leadership and client leadership understanding the impact that their demands have on individuals.
mm,
And I think as long as both parties appreciate that we're all humans at the end of the day, that you can't keep I'm going to mix metaphors terribly through this conversation, but you can't keep wringing more and more water out of a stone.
Yeah.
It just can't do it. It's not there. It's not possible. So when you get to the point where it's just literally physically, mentally, intellectually impossible to give more, something's going to break. And I'm not surprised that we have a mental health crisis in the industry because, a lot of individuals, teams, and agencies are operating at a pace which is not healthy. And
Mm.
they're operating at that pace because they realize they need to keep the clients that they have because the market is tight.
Yeah.
Clients know that to a certain extent, but
Yeah.
clients themselves are being pressured, at all levels of management. And so everybody in the workplace, I think there's a sense of paranoia out there.
Okay.
And I think that paranoia is translating into the way some, not all, clients manage agencies, and as a consequence, the way some agencies manage their people. So I think there's just a multitude of factors here.
Can I pick you up on that paranoia? Do you mean that, somebody's just about to eat my lunch, someone's going to steal my client, and so therefore I need to give that client more because they will just go somewhere else, and there's a whole queue of people outside their door waiting to take my client off me?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I've literally been having this conversation in recent days
Mm.
in board meetings that I've sat in, where I tend to help agencies look at their team structure,
Mm.
look at the capacity that they've got in the business, look at the hours that they've sold, and it's glaringly obvious. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that agencies are significantly over servicing clients. And when challenged about that, every agency leader knows that if you overservice, you're reducing your profitability. So
Yeah.
it's not a question of ignorance. Agency leaders are smart people. They lead agencies for a reason. Um,
Mm.
the difficulty is change. The difficulty is it is a fear of some other agency coming and eating their lunch. And the conversations that I've been having are that clients have the upper hand when it comes to pushing agencies because at the end of the day, they can and they do threaten, well, look, if you won't do it, I know somebody else who will. So there is a lot of paranoia out there.
Mm. Okay. And that paranoia, I imagine it's hard to hide in a team. When you emerge from that board meeting and everyone looks across and or at the team meeting or whatever, that I mean I've run agencies, and I've had those really chilling conversations either with a major client or with my days at WPP, when you get the call from the European CFO to say, I'm looking at your numbers this quarter,
Yeah,
you know, and those are difficult calls, and you'd
yeah,
be superhuman to be able to just put that in a box and walk out into the team and radiate confidence.
yeah,
And how do you, working with agency leaders, how do you counsel them around that? Not to be, actors or, make
yeah,
believe, but to marry that concern for their business with the concern for their colleagues.
yeah. I think the first point is to really encourage transparency. What I do find is, certainly in the last sort of 5 years, I've probably worked with upwards of 30 plus
Mm.
agencies. And what I do see is that sometimes the data that demonstrates the problem is held very closely at a leadership level.
Yeah.
Whereas actually, oftentimes the whole team is part of the solution.
Mm.
And it's not a problem that is solved overnight. If you are working with a client who is incredibly demanding, but has been used to being sort of what's the word I'm searching for? Has been used to getting what they want, getting their
Yeah.
own way,
Yeah.
then it's very difficult to change that behavior in the client.
Mm.
Um, and it takes time and it takes strong conversations. It takes mediation. And I think that, there is a real opportunity, a real need for senior leaders to increase their confidence in going back and having the conversation with the client in a constructive way,
Mm.
in a way that steers the client away from thinking about hours, but thinking about the value that the agency is bringing.
Right.
Um, this leads into and could lead into a whole other conversation, obviously, about impact, and evaluation and measurement, but I won't go down that road. But I
Mm.
think it behoves leaders to have the confidence and the capability to have difficult conversations with clients. If that client still insists on asking for more and more and more and more, and if the team is basically just getting more and more stressed by it, and that particular client becomes a client that nobody in the agency wants to work on,
Yeah.
then I do believe that agency leaders have a responsibility to consider the ultimate sanction, which is to walk away from that client.
Mm.
Um, so, as you know, I've got into partnership with James Tutt with this collaboration we're calling the Pitch Doctors. James brings 20 years of experience on the client side, and we spoke literally just yesterday about the client agency relationship and the sort of the power. Where does the power lie? And the relationship between the client and the agency. Oftentimes, it is the client that sort of goes on a power trip with the agency, saying that the agency is this transactional supplier who
Mm.
does as I ask, and if they don't, somebody else will. And that starts right up front when you're pitching the business.
Yeah.
So what we espouse and what we believe very strongly is part of the problem, part of the solution to overcoming the problem of overservicing and productivity starts at that point of first contact with the client.
Yes.
Um, it basically you set your stall out from the get-go.
Yeah.
You do, and this is where systems and process do come in. You clearly lay out what it is you're going to do for the fee that the client has got. You
Mm.
clearly show what success looks like.
Okay.
You make it very clear that you are going to have a monthly conversation about workload. You make it very clear that you are going to push back when there is clear evidence of scope creep. And those sort of few factors, plus others, agencies need to, I think, have more confidence in doing it. And I've got examples, if we have time,
Mm.
where I worked with an amazing client,
Yeah.
and she was a serial client of mine, so I knew her very well. But her attitude, she was a tough cookie.
Mm.
She didn't stand any nonsense from the agency. The agency didn't perform. We knew about it.
Yeah.
Equally, when I went back to that person on a quarterly basis and said, you know what, Michelle, we have delivered X amount of pounds in spend against a budget of this. This can't continue. We had constructive, collaborative conversation. Say, okay, we sort this out. I don't want my team being. That's the sort of relationship you need to have with your client. We used a phrase, and I use it today from Text 100, which is called you need to find the shared agenda.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really good way of framing it.
You know,
Yeah.
and that a relationship built on one person's agenda is not a relationship. It has to be mutual.
Yeah. Yeah. I think agencies, when I was running agencies, a number of times I've said, we want to be your partner.
Yes.
Came out of my mouth in pitches. And very often that meant we want you as a client for a very long time on our terms. Um, and I think agencies probably need to think quite hard about what they mean when they say, we want to be your partner.
Mm.
Because
Mm.
that involves a bit of give as well as take.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so perhaps defining that at the beginning of the relationship is what are we prepared to invest in the long
Yes.
term health of the relationship is probably quite an important question for agencies to have an answer to.
Yes. Yeah.
And they
And
probably
I
don't
mean,
think about it that often until things are problematic or it's a bit of an afterthought sometimes.
yeah. 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 I mean, I think the behavioral part of this is
Yeah,
probably the most important part, which is the agency leaders need to model the way
yeah,
that the agency deals with the client.
yeah,
Um, and I don't want to ever paint the client as the big bad wolf in all of this. Sometimes agencies are their own worst enemies, but I think agencies, if I look at it from the agency side, we have to understand the pressures that the clients are under today.
Yeah.
And I think that at times we as an agency side of the industry, we don't pay enough attention to trying to understand what pressure is the client under. Why are they behaving in the way that they're
Absolutely.
behaving?
Yeah.
Asking for more, for less? Who's giving them the instructions to do it?
Yeah.
What's been working or what hasn't been working? You're an expert in mediation. These are questions that both sides need to understand in order to reach that shared agenda.
Yeah. Yeah. A former colleague of mine who went in-house and then worked for me again said, the biggest eye opener for her when she was in-house was this idea that she would have meetings with the agencies, and they obviously thought it was going to be the most important, most entertaining meeting that person was going to have that week. And she
Right.
said, I'd go into a meeting with the agencies. They're, good agencies, and she used to work with some very high quality agencies when she was in house. But she said, I've just come from another meeting where we've understood that our French distributor has gone out of business.
Yeah.
So, we now no longer have access to the French market, which, was
Yeah.
15% of our revenues. And then you
Yeah.
go into an agency meeting and they can, they're beautiful, dressed like racehorses, happy, smiley, shiny world that they live in. And they sort of say, why don't we do this? And why don't we do this? And why? And it's just like, he said, it was such a jarring
Yeah.
thing that, and even though they were smart, very smart agencies she worked with, they couldn't understand what she said. Everything you've just said is irrelevant because, you
Yeah.
didn't ask what else is going on in the business. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's
It's
that
so true.
desire sometimes to be transactional. It's that go for the transactional approach rather than the what you describe very accurately as the shared agenda of
Yeah.
understanding what else is going on and aligning your outcomes, the way you work, to how their business runs. And
Yeah.
we can talk about measurement and bullshit measures that the PR world has invented
Yeah.
that have no meaning outside the PR world, and then we wonder
Yeah.
why CEOs
Yeah.
won't go. What does engagement mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
What's this unit you've just invented that I've
Yeah.
never seen in any other context, and why do you want me to pay attention to it?
Yeah. Exactly.
But we're off on a tangent now. But
I'm holding myself back because I can feel myself wanting to get in and go down that particular road.
um, but to talk about some. I mean, I set this up by saying tools and processes not great unless the people using them are leaning into them, that they feel that
Yes.
they're part of a proper agenda for dealing with this productivity pressure. Are there any tools and processes that are your go-tos that that you would say we should definitely build this into our thinking, not think of them as the magic bullet because they're clearly
Yeah.
not. But
Yeah.
what kind of tools and processes do you are in your bag most of the
Yeah.
time?
Yeah. Well, we've got. I think we've got quite a long way into this podcast without mentioning the word of timesheets. And timesheets are a contentious issue.
Yeah.
I know some very good friends of mine run some very good agencies who completely refuse to go to timesheets.
Well,
My
I'm
view
interviewing
is
Daryl Sparry in
I,
a
I was
series, and
obviously thinking of my very good friend Daryl Sparey at that particular point. But look, here's my view is I said earlier that, at the end of the day, our unit of currency internally, and I want to
yeah.
make that really, really clear, internally, our unit of currency are the hours we have available to sell with the team that we've got.
Mhm.
Now, no business on the planet should be operating without knowing how many units of currency they have sold or how many products they have sold.
Mm.
So it staggers me that more agencies, so many agencies do not do accurate capacity planning against a scope of work that has been agreed with the client
Mm.
internally, just so that you can give the entire team knowledge to say, next month we have got this event, we've got that, we've got XYZ is happening. This is the number of hours that we have estimated it's going to take. Doesn't
mm,
matter what we're billing the clients because that's where the value-based pricing comes in.
mm.
So, that's a whole other discussion. But internally, I think the entire team needs to understand, okay, I've been allocated this time to do this work and it's supposed to take this amount of time. If
Uh,
you are
can I
tracking
just
that,
ask a question?
yeah.
Is that something that you would recommend to your agency clients that they share with their clients to use time
No, not
recording as a forward planning discussion?
no, I don't. I mean, there are cases where it is useful to share it with the client, but
Right.
my point is that no, I think it is an internal management tool that gives you the data and the insight as to why people are stressed. What is it that clients are asking us to do that is causing us to overservice? Are there are the people who are on the team being given tasks that they are perhaps not experienced enough to
Yeah.
deliver in a time frame that is realistic?
Yeah.
So timesheets both provide the insight into what has happened and provide foresight into what's going to happen, and then provide an environment where we can look at why productivity is low.
Mm.
And when I was at Hotwire, we were a big agency, not one of the biggest, but decent size, and every month, every single team in the business would submit their hours forecast for the month ahead. And
Yeah.
it was a planning tool, so
Yeah.
we could see so and so's on holiday, so and so's sick. How do we backfill?
Mm.
But more importantly, it enables the team and management to say, actually, you know what, I can see why you're overstretched because we've sold too many hours and there's not enough hours to deliver. So it will show where there is the
Mm.
opportunity to hire, as
Yeah.
well as showing where perhaps people are underutilized. And we might have a problem because we have too many people and we haven't sold enough hours. So the important point is that that data is not delivered into a vacuum to disappear. It is
Yeah.
shared and discussed with the whole team. So
Right.
everybody from the account administrator through to the director knows this is how many hours that they've been sold. This is how many hours they have available. This is what is expected of them. So the key principle, Nigel, is transparency. How you use that externally, that's up to the agency. There are many agencies who would share it. We would share it in discussions with this client that I talked to you about
Yeah.
when we were over servicing because we felt confident that we could do that.
Because it
Most
seems like
times
a strong component of shared agenda to
it
say,
really is. It's making
where,
sure.
well, which is why I'm asking why instinctively you wouldn't share it as a stress avoidance technique to say, hey, client, was it Angela? I can't remember the name of
Michelle,
the client.
Michelle.
Michelle, sorry. You know, I can see that we're heading for a crunch this month or the month after with what you expect us to deliver.
Yes,
How, before we get to that crunch point, how can we avoid it being a problem for us both, where we
yes,
under deliver, quality drops, whatever. How can we get the best outcome for you with the resources that you want us to allocate to you? And
exactly.
avoiding a problem is obviously way better than trying to solve one that's already there.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm
And,
just
and
interested to why you instinctively you wouldn't share it with the client.
at the moment, that's because I think what we need to do as an industry is we need to show value, not hours.
Right.
So, I think if the campaign is scoped in the right way
Yeah.
and the measurement and what success looks like is defined in the right way,
Yeah.
then value-based pricing is all about the value that the agency has delivered to the client, measured in whatever metric that looks like in
Yeah.
business terms.
Yeah. Okay.
That's nirvana. I think the reality
Yeah.
is that exactly as you say, and it's exactly how we operated. I would check in. I was the sort of the corporate sponsor on this big account,
Yeah.
and I would check in after a couple of weeks to say, okay, let's just quickly consolidate our timesheets. Where are we up to? How much time have we spent?
Yeah.
We're over servicing already. Okay, why is that happening? nine times out of 10, it's a really simple reason that five people went to a meeting in Slough for 3 hours and they all put
Yeah,
3 hours down, five people suddenly. So there's very,
yeah,
very tactical ways in which you can then start to make decisions around how we're capturing our time, how we're planning our time, and then how we communicate the problem to the client. But
mm,
the key thing is that you've got data to be able to have that constructive conversation with the client.
mm,
Uh, how you do it, how you frame it, how you avoid now that the trap of, well, aren't you using AI to do all of this now? That's a whole other conversation. So it is now, it's become
yeah,
trickier than it was
yeah,
5 years ago when I was doing this with Michelle, right? It's
yeah,
definitely become trickier, and I recognize that. But unless you've got the data, unless you've got the insight from good capacity planning, resource planning, then you haven't got a leg to stand on him, bluntly.
yeah. You echo what one or two other people have said. Carolyn Bowick, who I interviewed on this series, talked about, the she came at it from an in-house perspective around the challenge of challenging leadership, constructively challenging the person asking you to do more with less. And she said, tools, if you rely on tools alone, they won't save you, but they will give you visibility of the
Yes, I
problem,
would
which
agree.
is kind of, what you're saying. They give you the context to have the conversation with that person. And can be, a point that supports your case.
Yeah,
But you probably it won't just saying, look, we're squeezed, give us more money or give us less to do alone is clearly never going to do it. That has to be from a point of view, from a position of credibility.
yeah, and it's the same in the agency, Nigel. So often that account directors or account managers, I'm having this exact conversation at the
Yeah,
moment, are saying we're stretched. We need to hire a new junior account manager.
yeah,
Okay, well, show me the numbers that support another person.
yeah,
Or are you just adding another person into the overservicing mix, which is just going to drag down your profitability? So
yeah,
that, I think part of the solution to all of this
yeah,
is commercial training, is
yeah,
the lack of commercial acumen that agencies, sadly, I think, display, even at senior levels, because we come into this industry we come into this industry because we're creative.
mm,
We enjoy we enjoy building relationships.
mm,
People don't come into this business necessarily to run a business. So when they're given the opportunity, they're woefully ill prepared. And I think, okay, we have, both PRCA and the CIPR have got, their, CPD, and I think it's really important. But I do believe that commercial acumen starts at account executive level. Account execs need to understand that actually, words like productivity are not evil words. Profitability is a good thing. Um, Time management is not there as a stick to beat you with. It's actually there as a support crutch
yeah.
because you can spot the problems as they happen. This behavior, this mentality, is rare, and I think there's more we as an industry could be doing to talk about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's a whole three other podcast series that we've just covered off in there. So thank you very much, Andy. Always really useful. I'm always educated after a conversation with you. Um, and so thank you again, and look forward to hearing your thoughts on the other episodes, which sometimes echo, sometimes slightly conflict with what you've said. But in the meantime, thanks very much indeed, and have a good day.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.